Once in a while, we get ourselves a scoop that turns the entire Vancouver market upside down. And no, I'm not talking about the actual topic of the title and thumbnail of this video. I'm talking about Thomas Drance's rant on Canucks Talk earlier this morning. Man, did anybody go out there and hear that? He calls out Rick Dhaliwal's talking point about Vancouver Canucks people and the organization being affected by the media, and Drance goes out there and says, hey, like, what are you talking about? The media is the softest it has ever been in this city, and they're going. They have no choice. They need to be able to handle this media and more. It was such a great rant. I really wanted to give some shout outs over to Thomas Drance because obviously, you know, Drance has his haters. Drance had his very primary antagonistic role in the Vancouver scope of social media over the past few years. He has admitted that he's kind of calmed that down a little bit. He doesn't really go at people as much as he used to, but there still are some very good highlights. So obviously, big shout out over to Drance, but that is technically not the topic of today's video that I wanted to discuss. Instead, I wanted to go over to an article published on sportsnet.ca by one Nick Kypreos. Yeah, that's right, we're talking about some general NHL news here, and highlighting Vancouver in the process, because earlier this afternoon, Nick Kypreos posted the Real Kipper Trade Board 1.0, a first look at intriguing possibilities. Now I know what you're thinking, wait a minute. Trade possibilities? Trade boards? What are we talking about here? I thought we were talking about a guy and his contract demands. Okay, yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about, because listed on the Nick Kypreos Trade Board 1.0 is a very particular Vancouver Canucks name. It is under the intriguing names to watch part of the article. Of course, it begins with Florida Panthers center Sam Bennett, but if you scroll down to the fourth name on the list, you have yourselves Brock Boeser out of the Vancouver Canucks organization. This is what Kypreos writes about Vancouver's right wing. Vancouver, eyeing to compete for a Stanley Cup with a core locked in of Pettersson, Miller, and Hughes, have a tough decision to make on Brock Boeser. He led the team with 40 goals last year, but will he continue on as part of this core? With Jake Guentzel pushing the value of UFA scoring wingers up, Boeser is looking for 8 years north of the $8 million AAV range, and Vancouver isn't yet prepared to pay him what his projected value is. If no contract extension is on the way, the idea of losing him for nothing in free agency isn't all that appealing either. Canucks management isn't one to sit around and have been rather busy traders in recent seasons. Until an extension is signed, Boeser will be a candidate to trade to watch this season. And that is something that I think a lot of Canucks fans had sort of feared heading into the year. Oh yeah, Brock Boeser's contract is expiring, and so there isn't really any certainty. He's currently making $6.65 million until the end of this season at 27 years old. Is he going to want to stay? Is he going to want to get overpaid? Is he going to force his hand to not signing a cheaper deal? Is he going to go to the market? Right now, Brock Boeser is on pace for 67 points in 75 games. He did miss a little bit throughout the season with injury, but he still has been producing at a fairly significant clip, especially compared to his body of work in the past. Now, last year, of course, was Boeser's breakout year. He had 73 points in 81 games played, 40 goals, and he was a point per game in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. He was a stud. Maybe not at the same goal-scoring, sniping on the rush kind of levels like he was at in his rookie season, but he finally blew past the 30-goal marker, establishing a 40-goal season for himself. And it was interesting because you think about some of the notes from last year, we did have Patrik Allvin call out Brock Boeser in the media, saying that, yeah, I told Brock he could have hit 50, but he didn't. He slowed down. Brock Boeser had however many goals he had at the All-Star break, and in the second half of the season, his goal-per-game numbers went down, which ultimately led him to a 40-goal season rather than a realistically attainable 50-goal season, that in which he was on pace for the majority of the year. So Patrik Allvin already acknowledged in the media that, yeah, this guy could have been a lot more productive goal-wise, but he still had a strong playoff. He was still a point-per-game guy. He still had 7 goals in 12 games in the postseason, including some extremely clutch goals against the Nashville Predators. Brock Boeser was all that and more for Vancouver in the 2024 Stanley Cup Playoffs, and look, teams are going to look at that and say, yeah, that's a great player. Teams are going to remember that. Teams are going to see Brock Boeser and think about, oh, the 4-goal game he had at the beginning of 2023-2024 to get Vancouver started under Rick Tocchet and to really put a stamp on that season for the Canucks. This season, sure, he has missed a few games here and there, but he is still on pace for a 26-goal season with a career high in assists. His assist marker, he's on pace for 41 on the year, which would be a career high. Ultimately, there's a lot of value here out of Brock Boeser, and even though he might not necessarily be a number 1 player on a team, you can say in Vancouver, Hughes, Miller, Pettersson are all more important than Brock. Brock is still a very effective point producer and goal scorer, so there's going to be value here. Whether or not that's $8+ million on the open market, who really knows? But if there is a world where Brock Boeser is starting to say, hey, I could get some money here, then we have to start thinking about what Vancouver decides to do. Kypreos is saying that the Canucks are not willing to go to that 8x8-ish mark, 8 by more than $8 million a year, so something in the maybe $65, $66, $67 million range. It is interesting to me, though, that the comparable of Jake Guentzel is brought up here, saying, oh yeah, because Jake Guentzel got this amount of money in the free agent market in Tampa Bay, that really sets the market for Brock Boeser because, I mean, Guentzel had $9 million as an AAV on his contract, and he also has had much better, more productive seasons in the NHL than Boeser has ever had in his past. So I do think that Jake Guentzel is a much better player, a more versatile option than Brock Boeser is, so I don't think the comparison is a great one, although I understand why it's being brought up here. Oh, point-producing, scoring wingers, American guys, right? Ultimately, though, there was a response on social media to this idea, like this tweet posted by Irfan Ghaffar from earlier this morning, with Real Kipper suggesting that Brock Boeser is looking for an 8-year deal north of $8 million. Things are pretty quiet around the two sides. Nothing new to report, no secret Brock loves it here, but a 40-goal scorer is going to get paid. His camp has no problem waiting this out. The Canucks do like the fit and chemistry Boeser and Miller have created. Miller is signed long-term. Pettersson and DeBrusk signed long-term. I can't imagine the two sides don't start to have conversations before or early in the new year. Now, there are some replies that go out there and talk about the status and how Boeser is important to the team, like this one from Vikingstad. The contract of 8 years will pay him until 35. $8 million per is pretty good for a 35 to 40 goal reliable two-way guy who loves being here and is a fantastic human. Thinking that we can replace him is laughable. For a team that's already struggling for consistent offensive results, I think you don't help yourself by letting Boeser walk. Unless you intentionally know you're going to replace him with a Rantanen or a Kaprizov or something like that. And I think for a lot of Canucks fans, the majority that we're seeing here in the replies is that, yeah, the cap's going up, yeah, getting Boeser more money than Quinn Hughes might not seem all too appropriate on paper, but you gotta think about it contextually speaking. Like, Quinn Hughes' contract is going to expire in a few years. That guy's gonna get like maybe 12 or 12.5. Like, he is that good. He is so amazing. Even some of the other defensemen that have been signed recently, I mean, Cale Makar's making 9, right? Like, you think that guy isn't capable of getting, let's say, 10, 11 to 11.5, maybe 12? If he were to re-sign a contract right now with the Colorado Avalanche, I think he is a little bit inferior than Quinn Hughes this season, but that's besides the point. Reputation carries a lot of weight. And the fact is, for Brock Boeser, even though he might not get 40 goals again this year, he has still been under a point-per-game clip, and he has that 40-goal season already under his belt. So he's always going to have that label attached to him. Whether or not the Vancouver Canucks commit $60-something million to Boeser in the next little while here is something that remains to be seen, but at this point, considering the money they gave to Miller, considering the money they gave to DeBrusk, considering the money they gave to Hughes and Elias Pettersson, it seems like Boeser's name is an inevitability to get re-signed over here. We just gotta wait and see the final details. So for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this Brock Boeser Vancouver Canucks update. There also were a few extra things that were talked about in the Vancouver media today, but I didn't want to talk about them here. I don't want to talk more about Rick Tocchet joking around about Elias Pettersson getting gas and eating eggs today. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, some of the narratives that are being spun around here in this city. But for now, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Brock Boeser and his next contract with the Vancouver Canucks. What are your thoughts on where it's going to go, and what are your thoughts on the future of this team? I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.